Sometimes we get too focused on the notes and not the tone, and that can be a real big issue for a lot of bass players, as you can end up playing things and get the notes, but they don't sound like they do on the recordings, or they just don't sound good, and that all comes down to your bass tone. So let's get into the issues that you might have with that today. So for starters, we're going to worry about this hand, and then we'll get onto this hand. So I'll break the video into two parts, and we're going to start with whatever hand is on the fretboard, because for you left-handed people it will be this hand, for you right-handed people it'll be this hand if you're playing a right-handed or a left-handed bass. But either way, the hand that's doing the fretting has a very important job when it comes to tone, especially on a fretted bass. I know I haven't got a fretted bass here, okay, I've got a fretless, but I can still tell you what to do for demonstration. Essentially, if you've got a fretted bass, which I'm sure most of you do, you've got the frets, right? And you can see them, you can visualize them. We're going to say for the purposes of this video that away from the fret is towards the neck, and towards the fret is towards, you know, the pickups, the bridge, whatnot. So this is towards the fret and this is away from the fret. So if you think about your first fret, which is probably about here, this is towards, coming this way, and that is away from the fret. And you want to play as towards to the fret as possible. You don't want to play directly on top of it, just a little bit behind the fret, and then you won't get that fret buzz. Now on a fretless it doesn't matter, as I can play anywhere. I could play here where, you know, it's still perhaps not the best tone if I played there because I'm really close to the nut, but I still won't get that buzz which you'll get with a fretted bass. But just make sure to play as close to the fret as possible. Now from here on out, this applies to all basses, fretted and fretless, now that we've got the fretted stuff out of the way. You want the right amount of pressure, and the right amount of pressure is, if you're on a fretted bass, where it is where, you know, you don't get that buzz on the fret, you play, you know, as close to the fret as possible. You get that position there. You just want to find what the minimum amount of pressure is that is required to get a note clean. So as you can hear, not getting that note, not getting that note, a bit buzzy there, and then in. If you couldn't hear that well, then it's just in the room rather than what's going on the recording back there and what's coming out of the jack at the end of this thing. But you will be able to hear it. You'll be able to hear it sort of a no note or a harmonic depending on what you're playing. Then you'll hear this buzz, and then you'll hear the clean note, and you want to remember that pressure. Now it may change slightly, and it will higher up where you might want to put a bit more fourth in, but it shouldn't really be that noticeable. You will notice the strings are closer to your fingerboard up here though, so this is why I'd urge you start on the first fret and just on each string gauge where it is, as it will be slightly different for each string, and just practice, you know, just doing that and just getting good clean note, and then doing it on every single string until you get those clean notes, and then practice just getting clean notes out, and then you can practice it anywhere. And if you're getting good notes just sounding everywhere, and you're not putting too much pressure on, because that is inefficient and it can cause, well, it doesn't really cause bad tone if you're putting too much pressure on. It's just a pain for your hands, and it can cause bad tone as your fingers get tired and you sort of relax a little, and you know, you cause other issues. So it can lead to it, but more sort of in the long term you're playing, just pressing really hard isn't going to necessarily ruin your tone, it's just going to ruin your fingers. So I wouldn't recommend it, and obviously pressing too lightly, you're not going to get the notes. But the tendency is you press much too hard, especially in those beginning stages when you're playing the bass. That even hurt what I just did just then. My fingers are a bit sore now. But especially in those beginning stages, as your fingers really do get sore, because you're literally pushing them into metal strings. But there's no need to push them in any more than they need to go. And if you feel like you really have to push them down so much more than you think you need to, then you can always lower your action by adjusting the truss rod. If you don't know what it is, it's a rod in your neck which essentially changes the angle of it so that your strings are either lower on it or higher, so you can adjust the action. But do be careful on a fretted bass If you get it too low, then it will hit the fret and you'll just get loads of buzzing and tone issues. So if you're not confident on it, then go get a professional to do it for you. But you can always just watch a YouTube video. It's not really difficult, but do find out where the truss rod is on your bass, because sometimes you have to take your neck off, which is really irritating. On this bass you don't. But if you do feel that that really is a problem, then try and get that adjusted. You can also change some string height with the bridge saddle as well. So there's all things that you can do if you feel like your action's still way too high. But if you're a beginner, I wouldn't stress all too much. Just try and find that place where you get good tone. But if you really find like you're really struggling and you've been at it for at least a week or so, and you still feel as if I just have to press so hard, consult another musician if you know them about it and say, is this too much? And then you can get your action lowered if it is too much. If not, then sorry, you just sort of have to face it and go through with it, or maybe transition it to a fretless because the action is generally lower, but perhaps not as a beginner because there's some intonation difficulties there. So once you've established the right amount of pressure and you've established where you need to play near the fret so you can get that good tone, then it's all about sort of just rinse and repeat and going around and doing that, like I've said. And you know, this takes a significant amount of time, but this isn't going to sound amazing if this hand isn't in check. And arguably, this is the hand that does most of the work when it comes to tone. It is often the one which is forgotten about, and it all starts with good grounding. If you see, look, I've got a pickup here, and on top of it, it doesn't come across great on camera because it's black on black, but I'm going to rest my thumb here if I'm playing the E string. I'm going to rest my thumb on the E string if I'm playing the A or D strings. I can put it on the A if I want D or G, and occasionally I'll go down to the D string, but I wouldn't really recommend it. So think of it as, you know, you can have it on the pickup here, so wherever your pickups are on your bass, you can have E and A. Then you can put it on the E string for A and D, and then you can have it on the A string for D and G. And it makes it easier to sort of not have to rake over your hand so much. As you can see, if I've got the pickup here, I've got to lift my bass up so it's in shot. I can't, like, going all the way down there is a bit much, so I'm just going to take my finger down to there, and then I don't have to stress it as much. As you do want your playing to be as efficient as possible, really, and that does give you the best tone. But now I want you to think about this hand and what you're doing with your hand, because some people, if I just visualize it, they'll just like pluck with their thumb down like that. I see a lot of beginners sort of pluck down with their thumb on the bass like that, and that's good for thumb style technique, but for learning standard bass technique, it's not the thing that you want to do. So I would say just scratch that for the time being. We're just going to be working on standard bass hand formation, so you need your thumb grounded on the strings, as I've just said there. So you're going to want to imagine sort of like a little walking man like this, and I don't want you to think pluck, I want you to think press. Now with words like plucking and strumming and whatnot, you think, oh no, you've got to sort of pull it up in some way, pull the string up, but that is not what you're doing. You want to press through the string, so you actually want to press down on the string. I'm not plucking or pulling up on the string in any way. I'm just taking my fingers like this and just pressing and just pressing and just pressing through the string. And you've got to think about it as pressing through the string. It's the same if you're doing double thumb. You know, you're thumbing through the string when you're doing double thumb. I can't do double thumb because I haven't spent the time to learn it. But for standard bass technique, press through the string, don't pluck up on the string. So you have to press it rather than pluck it, because if you pluck it, you get this sort of harsh sound, and that's not great. And if you press it, you can hear, you get a much nicer tone. And you know, they are two extremes. There's not many people that do all of this, and this is at that point just sort of slap stuff. But for standard bass technique, press to the string, don't pluck up the string. It's usually perhaps a bit more like that. You'll see people sort of like rake their thumb in a little bit, they do sort of weird things with the hand. I know the bass hand position looks weird because it's basically that, but I don't want any like plucking or pulling back like that. I just want push through the string, basically. Look, I'll show it up here so it's in shot again. Just pluck through the string like that, and you see it's like a little walking man just going across like that, and that is all that I'm doing. And then, you know, do that on any string. there, and that's all I'm doing for that. And just keeping it at that position. You can have it right on, you know, the bridge and over the fretboard for different tones. You'll notice the tone's different depending on where you put your hand, but for the time being, just keep them on the pickups. It's sort of the standard place where your fingers are going to rest. You can develop and adapt it later on as you go through things, and by all means find the place where you think your tone is best by fiddling around with this hand position, but keep it on the pickups for the time being, especially if you're just starting on this tonal journey, and then you should be all good if you think press the string, not pluck the string. Ultimately though, this does take a lot of time, but at the end of the day, if you master these things and you know the right amount of pressure for you on your bass, you know where to play against the fret, and you know what you need to be doing with this hand, then you're gonna have good sounding bass tone. And it's a thing that not enough people really think about, and in my opinion, it's a thing which is really important, as something can go from sounding absolutely horrible to amazing and masterful just with a simple tone fix. Now you're still going to need to be able to navigate around the fretboard nicely to keep that clean tone and not get a tired hand, but that all comes with further time and skill development. For the time being, just stick to simple one note stuff, or maybe incorporate, you know, a few more notes in as I'm doing here, and sort of just do it to a metronome. Perhaps 120 beats per minute is a pretty standard one, and just go like this and just play short notes, or just play a long note, let it ring out, play a long note, let it ring out, play a long note, let it ring out, and repeat, and just go through it and find where your tone suits best, and find where the tone suits best for you really. And when you think you've got good tone, then that probably means you do have good tone, as if the music you're making sounding good, then it is good. And that's all I've got for today's video, so I hope you've enjoyed, and I hope that now you have a little bit more of a guide on how to improve your bass tone, as it is a thing I think not enough people talk about. So that's it for today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!